I'm Amber Leidick, your host, and this is the Art of Equine Alchemy podcast. This podcast bridges the gap between science and spirituality in the equine industry. Through healing journeys and real stories shared by courageous and unfiltered individuals at the forefront of these shifts, we explore how they reclaimed their power, found their voices for themselves and their horses, and how the work they do paves a road that gives permission for everyone else to do the same. Our intention is to lead a shift within the equine industry that challenges outdated traditions and methods that no longer align with our updated understandings of the horses and humans, mind, body, and spirit. Our mission is to create an expansive platform and community, online and in person, to connect with conscious and compassionate people in the equine industry who have the courage to speak up on the behalf of the horses. Thank you for being here. Together, we can be the voice they do not have. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Art of Equine Alchemy. I am Amber Leidick. I am your host, which is weird for me because typically Shayleigh and I do these together, and she is now my guest, which is weird. We have our own podcast. If you guys want to check that out, of course, I'm going to stick a plug in for that as per normal. It's Tea Time with Shayleigh and Amber. And so today, though, we get to hear all about Shayleigh and her journey. So welcome, my dear.
Thanks. Thank you.
Why don't you start off with telling everybody what it is that you do and who you are in the world?
The struggle of that. Yeah, that's been an interesting thing for me, but I feel like I've finally come to a place where I feel pretty confident. There was a while, you guys, that I didn't want to call myself an animal communicator because I didn't really want to go full tilt into like having to have that as my label. And I had all these beliefs around what an animal communicator meant, and I was kind of basically like, oh, if I call myself an animal communicator, then I can't do like all these other energy things that I want to do. And Amber was like, yes, you can. Like you can be animal communicator. And so then I started going by mystic, but basically the gist of what I do, well, life coach for your pet. How cute is that? I am an animal communicator who specializes in giving voices back to animals and kind of a specialty in horses. Like horses are my heart, but all animals. And helping people find their voices too, giving people their power back. I teach animal communication. I love to guide people into tapping into their own intuition. I have a deep love and interest for the physical body and for nutrition, and I'm kind of like this little spiritual nerd. So, I love diving into all things mind, body, and spirit, especially when it comes to having conversations with your animals.
You said that so well, so well.
Thanks.
So, as some of you I might have know already, Shayleigh is going to be my lovely co-host at the event that we're having in October. So I definitely wanted to have her on first for many reasons, but the process that we're taking people through during this event and before it is these three different phases of transformation within alchemy. And the first one is really being like that fire. The one thing that either it was like something falling apart for you or some like big life change that happened that kind of felt like Dark Night of the Soul vibes. Like everything's falling apart. What am I doing? What is going on? Do you have a story around that where that sort of happened and on the other side has really created a space that you could be where you are now?
Oh yeah, Kit. My like first horse as an adult definitely turned my world upside down. Um, it's interesting to me because as I'm thinking about that question, I'm remembering that I've always had an affinity for the medical field and for helping horses. Like when I was a kid, I was that typical horse crazy girl that wasn't in a horse family. And I would write about horses, eat, sleep, breathe horses. And I always said that I was going to be a vet. And then I got into vet school or no, I didn't get into vet school. What the I started I started the pre-vet classes. So I did animal science with a emphasis on pre-vet. And I did like the first 3 years of that. And then I got married and I had a choice of either like moving with him for his job or staying there. And I decided to follow my husband because of why not? And I then from there was still interested in the medical field. I got my EMT license and then I got into nursing school and I was like, no, I don't really want to do that. And so at the time, I didn't have a horse, and my husband was really busy with work. So I interned at a dressage barn for a year. And it wasn't really my plan to intern at a dressage barn. Like, I just wanted to go to a place where there were horses and I wanted to ride, and I didn't really care, like, you know, whatever. And after that year, I was like dead set with a hardcore agenda on getting a horse, and I was going to be like a dressage rider and we were going to do X, Y, and Z. So I found this rescue and I was going to see this mare called Star, and it was right before Christmas or right after Christmas, like right around there. And the ground was all frozen and stuff. We get there and the lady pulls her out and she's like dead lame, like so lame that I was like, I cannot eat, like, this is a very clear sign to me. And I was not super in my spiritual space at that point, but I was like, no, I'm not going to be looking at a lame horse. And she was like, you drove all the way here. Like, why don't you look at the other horses? And for some reason, I was so resistant, but I was like, all right, like, we'll just walk down the aisleway. And so we walked down like between these two pastures, and there's like this gelding pasture on one side, and there were retired horses on the other side. And this dark bay gelding with this bright white star just like charged over to the fence and was like rearing and snorting and psycho and all this stuff. And I still remember it like it was yesterday. I was like, oh my gosh, who's that? And she's like, oh, that's Kip. We've had him for a year. He's body sore. And immediately that made me want to take him out. I was like, oh, is he? And then I was like, let's take him out. And I told myself, this was just my belief system at the time, where I was like, if I can get on this horse just right out of the field and walk, trot, canter him both directions, I'm getting him. And then he was freaking perfect. Like, hadn't been ridden in a year. I just hopped on him. Little did I know it was in store for us. And we took him home the next day, and he was so great. And then everything started falling apart. Like, all of the things that I thought I was going to do with him, not a near one happened. I thought that I was gonna, well, I tried riding him with a trainer, and all it led to was tears and sadness and despair. And I got him a bunch of different saddles, and none of the saddles worked. And long story short, he ended up getting diagnosed with kissing spines, which at the time, there wasn't a lot of information. This was almost 10 years ago now. So there wasn't a lot of information on kissing spine. Basically everything I read in this, I joined this Facebook group and everyone was like, death, death, death. And I was like, oh God, like, I'm getting off of this. And I took him to a vet. I ended up taking him to a vet osteopath in Ocala, Florida. And her name was Marilyn Mailer. She did so much for me. Like, she taught me a lot. She was super generous because I couldn't afford half the stuff, and she just cared about me and cared about the horse and really helped us out. But I will say, like, a turning point for me was I kept going to her for answers, and she was like, your horse is not going to get better unless you seek that, like, stop looking outside of yourself for answers. Like, you need to put in the research, you need to look this up, you need to make up your own mind about stuff, you need to understand the anatomy of the physical body and really like hold yourself accountable for taking care of this horse, because you can keep bringing him to me and we can keep doing all these things, but if you're not learning all this other stuff on the backside, your horse is like, he's not going to be where you want him to be. And that lit a fire under my ass, which then led me to talking to an animal communicator, which, believe it or not, like, I was open to it, but I was like skeptical about it. Like, I was like, well, I don't know, like, I'll listen to her, I'll hear what she has to say. And it was cool because I just felt very validated when I talked to her. I was like, wow, I really feel like a lot of this stuff is stuff that I've been hearing from him. And then I asked her if she would teach me, and she basically said no without so many words. And and I'm a Taurus, and I'm like a very driven, like, I love learning. I'm like a major nerd. And by her saying no, and it's kind of funny because all the things that didn't work out in my life experience are what brought me to where I am today. Like all the no's that I got and all the things where I thought I wanted to go one way and then my horses like knocked me on my ass or whatever have led me into this like beautiful, amazing life. I'm like, oh, thank you. So I read a book on animal communication and then basically shrunk my hip flexors because I was obsessed with sitting in a pretzel position on the ground for like hours at a time in between working and school. And I was like determined to practice. I practiced every day, all day, and well, as much as I can, really. And yeah, so Kip, he through his body taught me a lot. He kind of it was really cool that I ended up with him because I don't know that I would have taken this path had I gotten a horse that maybe had more of like an emotional thing going on or had something that wasn't so heavily surrounding the body. Because here's what's crazy to me now that I'm like where I am spiritually, how I know that their souls align to where we are in the moment and how their soul path aligns with our soul path. And they just know where we are and how to get us from there to where we need to be. And he knew that we needed each other. And he knew that he had to be a certain way so that I would let him in because at the time I was very emotionally like shut down. If you guys have followed us at all, you know my struggles with emotion. So if I would have had like a very emotionally driven horse, I probably would have just sold him. I don't know. But he forced me, he interested me with his body, and then he was so gracious in like all the changes that I brought to him and stuff. So he was really my, and I guess as far as I'm like making light of it right now because that's what I do when I feel sad about something. I will just laugh around it. But the dark night of the soul piece is like I got this horse and I was like a very wounded yet determined human that had this big agenda. And it was a massive ego death for me. Like it was like shifting away from entitlement. It was, and it's so crazy because the, I'm still learning how he never forced me out of that space. And then it's like, re-killing that ego with my other horses who are stronger than him. And I see all the ways where he never forced me out of it. He just kind of held space for me. But yeah, mine was like really him showing me how deeply I was seated in my ego and unintentional entitlement and in my agenda and really holding myself separate from who I was, which was gnarly. It was a gnarly 6 years that we shared together at first.
Okay, so tell us about your journey with Bro.
So with Bro, I do feel like there were a lot of loops being closed. And what I find is so interesting about the transition to the non-physical is most of us learn stuff in hindsight, and our horses are like so willing to continue guiding us. And I've noticed that with my own horses. I've noticed that with my client horses, how they continue, usually they transition and then they help us with grief. They send us signs that they're okay. They help us learn the lessons in hindsight. Bro was a very transformative horse for me. I got him for free. I just happened to go with a trainer of mine to a barn where someone was needing to rehome two horses. I saw him. He was 18 hands. He was skinny. He was neurological, and I was terrified of him. And it was the same feeling I got with Kip because Kip was like out of control. He was just kind of like squirrely. And when I took his blanket off, he tried to kick me. And I was like, I love him. But like in a weird, it wasn't like, it was weird. I was like terrified of him, but like loved him at the same time and felt safe with him at the same time. And that's how it was with Bro. And with Bro, he really taught me to he showed me that I could love a horse for who they are and not need all the like with Kip it was like I had this agenda. I have certain expectations of him. With Bro, it's like he came to me and I immediately knew his body wasn't going to hold up to anything I wanted to do and he was just going to be my partner that did Liberty work. And he really opened up my heart and showed me the fun in that and the fun in just having like an energetic connection. And when we got his diagnosis with his neck, and I knew that we were going to have like not a lot of time with him. Um, the date that we ended up choosing, I didn't realize was like on my dog's birthday. And for some reason, almost every time an animal of mine transitions, it's on a specific date, either an anniversary of one of my animals passing or on a birthday, which is super cool.
Okay,
But
that
bro,
happened with
like once we
sugar.
made that,
That's interesting because that
really?
was on my dad's I can't remember if it was his birthday or the day he died, but that's when sugar transitioned and I didn't realize that until after my mom had come down even the next day and was like, "Oh, it's so weird." So that's interesting.
That is interesting. Yeah, it's so crazy. And I got Biggie a month to the day after Dover died. And Dover, sent me all the flamingos and stuff. I've
Mhm.
had very like signier signs because as someone who's very spiritually open, I'm skeptical. I don't know if that's the Taurus in me or if it's just my realist mindset or if I have like a some sort of little negative mindset in there somewhere, but I can be so skeptical and I always need like the signier signs and my horses they're like, "Don't worry, we're happy to buck you off or whatever you need." But with him it was so interesting because he gave me so many signs that he was ready. Like he quit playing, he quit rolling. And this is just, it's like I had a hunch that something wasn't right with him. Like he had given me a couple of signs. We got his diagnosis. As soon as I got the diagnosis, it was like permission to just be and permission to leave. And as soon as he got that permission, he showed me so many things that he couldn't do. Like he's like, here's all the things that I've been trying to do for you until I can't possibly. But what's really unique about that whole situation is that bro had more lessons for me and it was the start of the Great Awakening and it was the start of me really embodying and teaching a move away from entitlement and his body couldn't carry forward the lessons. And so when he died, he literally told me that he was going to send all the lessons to Biggie. He's like, Biggie has to be the one to finish this. And I was really resistant at the time because Biggie and I like we're both Biggie's actually born in May too. He's also a Taurus and we have like a personality conflict. He's like a deeply sensitive, deeply caring, deeply eager to connect, pushy little chonk. And he's also deeply like in his integrity. And he's my no horse. I've always had yes horses, I realize. And he is a no horse. And it's like going through another ego eradication. Um, but yeah, when bro died, he laid down and all of this energy came off of him. And it was so cool. I say cool. I have an interesting relationship with death. So if cool sounds weird to you, it was beautiful. Because Kip, who was bro's best friend, really wanted to go over there but couldn't. And Biggie pushed every single horse over to him
Mm.
and like said, like he made everyone say goodbye. And then he laid down next to him and all of his energy went into Biggie. It was so wild. It was the weirdest thing ever. So that was a long answer, but yes.
And do you feel like he's the biggest impact as far as like horses that you've had?
Dude, you know what's crazy is no, it's like all well, Kip was my
Mm.
biggest impact because Kip brought me into animal communication, changed my whole life. I created an entire business around my lessons from him. Bro was the gateway into compassion because I did not live a very compassionate childhood, I would say. And I had to go through a lot of ego eradications in many ways, and Bro was the gateway to that because he was so heart centered. He really led with his heart. He was so willing. And with him, because his body was so broken, but his spirit was so strong, it led me to really seeing how much a horse is willing to sacrifice themselves for
Mm.
the sake of connection. And that was intense for me. That was like, um, I really saw what he was giving up to like please me and make me happy and work with me and connect with me. And I was like, that is insane. And then I, of course, have Biggie, who is also a game changer for me. I got him again, somehow had this agenda around him. I thought I was over that, but no, it turns out humans just keep going through cycles until they finish them all. And I got him because one of my clients was like, you've talked to him a couple times. I think he would be really great with you. He's too much horse for me. And of course, my ego mind was like, oh, he's probably just a little dysregulated. Like, that's probably just his nervous system. I'll get him. All right. He'll be fine. And no, the 3 times that I rode him, he savagely bucked me off. And I was like, okay, should have listened to you first. Like, that was the old me coming in. I'm here now. Sorry that you had to like break me to do that. And Biggie has been so pivotal for me because I have been adamant on closing my heart to him. Like I have been dead set on we do not get along. And it's not that I'm not compassionate. It's not that I don't take care of him. It's not that I'm not compassionate towards him. It's just he prods the unhealed parts of me that like strike a chord in me. Like he makes me cry and he's just, I feel like nothing is easy with him. But in that same sense, because he's so firm in his no and in his integrity, it's so rewarding to see that when I let go of all the resistance and I'm in my own integrity and I'm without ego, without agenda, without entitlement, how willing and fun and fluid it is to do Liberty work with him. Or, I mean, he's had a lot of stuff happen in his body that I didn't get diagnosed until this last year. So before that, I was doing all this like tacking up stuff with him, and he was so willing to do that. And then when I got x-rays and saw like all the stuff going on in his body, I was like, dang. So all of my horses, I don't think I'm capable of just having like a horse that's not deeply spiritual.
And I also think that speaks a lot to the fact that when you're teaching stuff and when you're holding space for people to go on their own journeys, it's like the lessons have to keep coming. And I feel like the horses have chosen us where they're like, oh yeah, this one needs lots of us. There's lots of lessons and it can't be all just one horse. We're gonna spread these out. We're gonna work in layers and make sure that we really get down to the like core of all the things.
Oh yeah, I know. And it's so funny. Anytime I'm resistant to a lesson or I choose not to take it. So like, for example, the mare who I originally went to get, who was lame, I found out later from the rescue that she had a keratoma. And so she was like, she's totally sound now. She just needs special shoeing. And I was like, whew, dodge that bullet. Then I get Biggie and his person's like, by the way, he had a keratoma removed from his left front. And I was like, what are the odds? Like, what did I need to learn about a keratoma? And I find myself like, if a lesson presents itself and I'm resistant to it or whatever, it just shows up in another animal or it shows up in a different way. And I agree with you. It's totally when you are teaching it, you do have to go through what the animal feels like, what the human feels like. Like there's a sense of relatability. And I think part of that is we are connected, and that's what we came to teach, right? Like that connection, that mind body spirit connection that we're not separate of.
So here's the question I'm asking everyone is what if you could change anything in the industry? I know there's a lot of things, but if you had to pick just one, what would be the one that would be the most important for you?
Well, I'm me, so I'm gonna pick two. For one,
I wouldn't expect anything less.
entitlement.
Mm.
Entitlement is 100% like my number one, just because it's what I've been called to by the horse collective, the animal collective, but more specifically the horse collective to speak about. Entitlement drives abuse and lack of integrity and lack of care and lack of responsibility. And when we feel entitled to another's body, another state of, their state of being, we put ourselves above them, we disregard them, and we completely disconnect from the essence of who we are. And the horses they're calling it the Great Awakening. And it is this mass shift and really acknowledgement, awareness of how many ways we are feeling entitled to others. And also, when we're entitled to others, we're giving them so much power, so much of our power. We're basically like falling victim essentially. And so part of why I aligned with Amber and we became such good partners is because we both believe in, staying in our own power and everyone having the autonomy to make their own choices. So really helping people. I wish that the entitlement would change. And the reason why I feel like I need like a second piece to that is because the entitlement won't change until the belief that we're separate of our horses changes. Like, as long as people are thinking, I'm the rider and you're the horse, or I'm this person and you're that person, and we forget that we have the same emotions, this pretty much the same nervous systems, similar bodies. Like, we are so similar to our horses. We are made from the same energy, like the same energy that beats my heart, beats your heart, that beats your horse's heart. When people forget that, it just leaves the door open to so much like hurt and pain and turmoil. And then we have all these people with like hate and judgment and jealousy and like people just hurting and healing in different ways. And there's this divide and separation and no compassion when everyone is every man for themselves. So I wish that people would really remember that we're not separate of each other. We are all made from the same energy. We're all equal. And I think that would change a lot.
Yeah, and I do want to add this in because I feel like I've talked about this with a couple other people, but that you talk to a lot of horses and you talk to a lot of different
Mhm.
people. So do you feel like if people can hold those values and that foundation within these relationships and partnerships with their horses, do you find that they are happy doing a job, like having, working with somebody as far as like if someone has goals to do performance stuff and have them be ridden versus sit in a pasture and hang out with their buddies? We talked about this swing and this pendulum of people either being fully entitled to their horses' bodies and using them for whatever serves their needs, and one that doesn't serve their needs, they, are all of a sudden just a byproduct of. And the other side is where people are so worried and feel so guilty about doing anything with their horse that they feel like, well, the only way my horse can be happy is if it's out in a pasture with its friends. And so is there a happy medium that you find when you talk to horses, like the horses that are healthy, the horses that have all of that stuff that you're talking about? Can that be achieved still?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Because they crave connection. They appreciate connection. And they also, um, horses might be non-predatory animals, but they love being in their power. Like they really appreciate being in their power. And I think if yeah, with the caveat of like all of that stuff being
Mm.
balanced, which more often than not, it's not, unfortunately. But I've talked to many horses that enjoy being ridden or worked with. Of course, we have to remember that like their experience is only what they've been given. So that's where our human mind kind of has to come in play too, because someone might come to me and say, "Oh, does my horse like working cattle or jumping?" Well, like if those are the only two experiences that we're giving them, then of course they're going to choose one. But if you have a horse that has all these different experiences and you can have a more open conversation, like what do you enjoy doing? And they might choose grazing or they might choose jumping. So that's where I like to just remind my clients like their world is only as big as we allow it to be, unfortunately. So if you have a horse in a tiny little glass ball, they're going to pick the path of least
Mm.
resistance within that little ball. So expanding their ability and their ability to choose and their choices, their variety of choices, I think is a really important piece to that.
Oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, is there anything else that you feel like you want to share before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I think that
Perfect.
that's my story in a little nutshell.
Perfect. So, thank you guys for listening and hanging out with us. If you guys want to learn more about Shayleigh, where can they find you?
My website, guided-voice.com or Facebook Guided Voice.
Okay, we're done. Yay. Thank you. And we will see you guys in the
See
next
ya.
episode.